All right. I guess we can get going. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Analytics TUG user group for March. Um, I guess first we're going to run through a few things. First of all, what makes this TUG a little bit different? And so this user group is dedicated to learning about analytics and everything in Tableau. It happens virtually basically every month. And it's a place where you can come learn about all the functions in Tableau and the entire platform, whether it's in desktop, web edit, ask data, and now more so, the AI related capabilities. It's going to be analytics all the time. And occasionally we're joined by the Tableau team to share and promote new products about the tool. And so be sure to look out for those. We definitely recommend subscribing on the Bevy group. That way you're up to speed with events. You get links for the recordings and you can sort of know what's coming in the future. There's also a forums page. You can just search up analytics user group to join, or you can also just scan this barcode in front of you to get access as well. And this TUG, we've got three co-leaders, Annabelle Rincon, Prasan Prem, and myself. And a little bit about Annabelle. So she's a Tableau ambassador and visionary, and she's got a blog which you can check out, Rativiz.
Yes,
And
it's a small V. It's a small mouse.
a
Rati
small
in Spanish.
Rativiz, yeah. So a small mouse, but it's on WordPress. Also follow her on Twitter so you can see everything that she's promoting there and all her posts. In terms of passions, what she loves Tableau, she loves her dog, and she loves chocolate. I think most of us love chocolate, even with all the sugar there is there. She's located in Zurich, in Switzerland. And she also co-leads an enablement and a data plus women webinar. And she does post about that as well on Twitter and her X and LinkedIn. And you can also check out her YouTube channel. Also, there's another barcode for you to scan to just get access to everything. About Prasan is also a Tableau ambassador and a visionary. He fell in love with Tableau and the data fam in general, and he spent a lot of his time giving back. And he's doing that by basically he founded Tableau Buddy and the Viz Diner, which are two platforms which you can go to. Usually, just learn a lot about the tool, analytics, career stuff, just to kind of get you started. It's been very successful. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend it. About his Tableau journey, Prasan started using Tableau in 2020. And he's currently working as a senior BI engineer at Emirates MBD. He's got a strong sense of community building and mentoring, like we just mentioned there. And with all his efforts, he's mentored over 500 plus data professionals, and that number definitely keeps growing every day. He currently has over 17,000 followers on LinkedIn. He loves data art, and he has currently received 4 Visit the Days. Fun facts about Prasan: he loves cat, food, and anime, and these are 3 things which he will die for. Myself, I am also a Tableau ambassador and visionary. I do freelance and contract data visualization for clients in different industries through Visite Analytics, which is like my side business there. I fell in love with Tableau. I kind of just dived all in 2020 as well. Lots of love from the community with a few of these other days there. I co-lead Makeover Monday, a weekly challenge, which I'll be talking a little bit about today, and it's the center of my showcase. I love to participate in that as it was my first introduction to the community and my first introduction to the data fam. You can check out my portfolio. I definitely do love functional aesthetics. I think that data can not only inform, but it also can be beautiful. Fun fact, I'm a Viz junkie, so even when I'm not posting on my portfolio, I'm usually still just heavily active in doing things on the side by myself there. I love documentaries, whether it's like, crime and, history, whatever you name it. Music, sometimes I dabble. I like to play the keyboard and pretend like I know what I'm doing. And other than that, I do enjoy like fitness and workout stuff just to, stay healthy and, increase my longevity. So a few ground rules for today before we hop into the speakers. You can interact with the chat section, but if you want to ask questions, please do use the Q&A so that your questions don't get swallowed up and skipped in the chat. And it also keeps it organized so that people can see and learn from the responses as well. The only rule that we have here is please enjoy yourself. Learning can and should be fun. The session is being recorded, and when it's done, you can find it on YouTube and our channel, and you'll also get a link that's shared across all platforms. Don't hesitate to send some love on social media. You can just look up at Analytics TUG on X, and you should be able to find us there. As far as today's agenda goes, we've done the welcome. And so after that, now we're going to move into the speaker section. We've got Fraser, who's going to be talking to us about building effective best practice checklists for unveils. And basically, he's just going to walk through some of what he has gone through with that and give us tips on how we can leverage those kinds of things to help ourselves in our own business. I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of a Makeover Monday submission, which I created. And Emily is going to do a design deep dive that's titled Love Across the Eras, which is one of her popular business, which I think a lot of us may have seen. Q&A is going to be constant throughout for all the speakers. So remember, just use the chat. I mean, don't use the chat. Do use the Q&A specifically. That way we can answer your questions in an organized fashion. Now we're going to bring in the speakers, and I'm going to pass it off to Annabelle to do that for us.
Thank you, Chimdi, for the introduction. So our first speaker of the day is Fraser Gallop. He's the CEO of Unveils, where he leads the charge in activating data using BI intelligent solution. He has 20 years of experience. You don't look so old, Fraser. I said that because we probably have the same age. Fraser is a data wizard mastering tool like Tableau or other tools that I will not pronounce the name. It's not just about number. He's a visionary in business intelligence, software development, and project management. Fun fact, he loves eating the golf course, exploring new travel destinations, and tinkering with vintage electronic. You are my kind of guy. I have to say that. I love that. So his presentation today will be building effective best practice checklists for unveils and work. And then we pass it to you, Fraser. So you can already, it will be a preview for us for what you will be presenting at TC.
All right. Okay. And I'm a rookie when it comes to Google Slides, I was saying, so we'll try our best here. So just let me know if my screen does not share properly here.
It's perfect.
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't see the bevy anymore, so I'll get the questions at the end. So thank you, Annabelle. Like she said, this presentation is building effective best practice checklists for unveils and work. This actually, well, let me back up and say Analytics TUG and presenting here is like one of my bucket list things. Since the first Analytics TUG that I went to, I was like, I want to present at this TUG. So I'm really happy to be here today. The presentation idea, I had this probably about over a year ago. And I think I might've mentioned it to Annabelle at TC last year. And then back in December, I was kind of writing everything up to apply to present at TC. So I kind of reached back out to Annabelle and said, I'd like to present this. Got accepted here, got accepted at TC. So I've only been thinking about checklists for the past at least month now, trying to get this ready. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with you today. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here today. It's been maybe 12 years or so since I started working with Tableau, and it's just amazing the community and the support that surrounds this product. It's just really encouraging. Whenever you have questions, there's lots of people to answer your questions and support you with Tableau, and that's one of the things that make it a really great product. So thank you everyone for being here today. Really appreciate it. Like she said, like Annabelle said, I'm Fraser. So you might be asking why is Fraser here today? Why is he qualified to talk about checklist? Well, I judge vizzes for work. So, a lot of times I'm doing peer review of associates' work. They're sending me stuff to review, providing comments and feedback. Sometimes we're also asked to review clients' existing dashboards. So if they have people, on staff that are doing things, they might come to us and say, can you check this out and provide feedback, help to improve things. So judging viz for work is something that I do. The other thing is I judge vizzes for fun. So as a Tableau ambassador, one of the things that they do is they look for volunteers out of the ambassador group to be a qualifier judge for Iron Viz. And so I've done that for the last 3 years. And even like after the first time that I did this and looked at the scoring sheet for Iron Viz, I thought this is something that, we can incorporate into work and use this not just for Iron Viz, but for, day-to-day work as well. So that's kind of where, I'm coming from in this and some of the experience I have. You might ask, what do you mean checklist? And I literally mean like checklist. So, I took a screenshot of the Word document that we use here, but it's literally just bullet points of things that need to be checked when you're building a dashboard. And it's either a check you pass, or maybe it's an X, and then there's comments that go along with that for things that you need to address and fix. When we do the Iron Viz judging, we're using a Google Sheet or a Google form, I guess, to do the marks, and then they're probably taking that into an Excel to do the work on that. But at work we just use a Word document. It's easy to make changes to it and modify it over time and improve things. So whatever works best for you, but it's just a simple checklist. So why do we need to have a checklist? Well, the most important thing is to be able to deliver a high quality product. So, we're working every day and we want to deliver like the best quality product that we can. And the checklist is a tool that helps us to do that. The other thing is that, being a data analyst and working with data, working with Tableau, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind and things that we have to remember and do as part of our job. So the checklist is something that helps you to be consistent in your work. All right. So from one project to the other, you might be worrying about data quality issues. You might be worried about design issues. The checklist helps you to think about other things as well as part of that, and making sure you don't let anything, you skip over anything or miss anything in your work. The last part about why do we need a checklist would be just to share standard organization. So if you're working in a team of analysts, we all want to have that same high quality product. You still want to be consistent with each other. So it's a way to share that standard across the rest of your group and be consistent that way. So back to Iron Viz. So when we do Iron Viz, there's a bit of a journey here. So the Iron Viz kicks off in mid-October-ish, and the entries are due at the end of November. So people have about a month and a half to kind of work on their vizzes and submit them to Iron Viz. And that's when the qualifier judges get activated and kick off. So what we're doing is each of the vizzes that gets entered into Iron Viz gets assigned to 3 judges at least. And then each judge is looking at about 15 to 20 different vizzes. So, if you're doing a submission, your work is going to be seen and reviewed by at least, or should be seen by 3 judges and reviewed. Everything gets tabulated. Our deadline for the judging is in December. And then in January, the top 10 are announced. The top 3, of course, get to continue on to the big stage, and we'll be the results in exactly 2 weeks, or 2 weeks less 1 day, I guess, at Tableau conference. So really excited to see that coming up really soon, and to be able to participate in that. So, how are the finalists chosen? So like I mentioned, it's a Google form that we fill out, and we have 18 different questions where we have to mark basically on the same 5-point scale. So if you completely fail, you get a 0. If you're successful, you'll get a 4. If you've done something outstanding, you get a 5. When personally, this is my way of marking things. If you've done a good job and it's passable, you're going to get that 4 for successful. But to get that outstanding, for me at least, you got to do something literally outstanding. It's got to go above and beyond everything else that we're looking at, to be able to get that extra point and kind of be Iron Viz material. So the first part of the score sheet is centered around design. There's 6 questions there. And it's really looking at things like, is your font size big enough that I can read it without a magnifying glass? Are you doing, proper contrast in your dashboard? Is it user-friendly? Is it easy to navigate? Are you clearly presenting data? Do you have your titles, your labels, everything kind of in place? This is about 1/3 of the marks are kind of centered around design in the Iron Viz. So it is a very important thing. The second set of questions are relating to storytelling. So again, 6 questions here. When we're doing Iron Vizes, it's really about establishing that narrative and storytelling. So you have to kind of pose a question at the beginning. You have to analyze that question, come up with conclusions, come up with insights at the end. But you're really doing more of an essay style dashboard to get the full points in the storytelling as part of Iron Viz. The last aspect here is the analysis. So again, 6 questions. Are you using accurate and clean data? For the qualifiers for Iron Viz, you can bring any data source that you want. And so as judges, we're not necessarily going through and validating your data to make sure that it's correct. It's rare that I'll actually even go into edit mode on an Iron Viz and look at it. Sometimes if I see that something just doesn't look quite right, I might go and look at a calculated field. But for the most part, when judging, we're kind of looking at things from the viewer perspective, where we're just interacting with it and reading through it. It does take 15 to 30 minutes to judge an entry for Iron Viz. So doing 15 to 20 of those, it is a significant amount of time that we're spending to make sure that we give fair marks and a fair judging to each of the Vizes. Some of the important things, though, like with the analysis, is it has to be aligned with your narrative and your storytelling. All the Vizes should kind of contribute back to the story and what you're trying to tell in the Viz. Another key one here is using Tableau's capabilities and strengths. If you're just using show me visualizations, it's all bar charts in your Iron Viz entry, you're going to get a mediocre, you might get a successful. What we're really looking for is that you're using Tableau's capabilities to show off Tableau as a tool. So, we're looking for those not out of the box visualization types, those custom ones. Show us a lollipop chart or 2, donut chart, not a pie chart. Those kind of things that just bring it to the next level and show that you've got the skills necessary for being on that big stage. So that was the Iron Viz score sheet. And like I said, that kind of got me thinking, how can we use this in real world applications in day-to-day work? So, the journey to production is a little bit different than Iron Viz. Typically we're developing a prototype. Maybe we're doing wireframes before we even do it in Tableau. Typically we have a chance to iterate at work. We're not necessarily just delivering and it's a one-time thing. Lots of times it's an interactive thing where we're going back and refining and improving. But eventually we do kind of get to the point where we publish it to production and the users have their finished product. I'll kind of relate a story. Like Annabelle said, I've been working with data and coding and things for a while now. I'd say at least 5 years ago, maybe more. I was working on a dashboard, and there was a data source that like I knew super well. I was one of the ones that kind of worked on building the original database. So I knew the data inside and out, and I built this beautiful dashboard and kind of got it together and headed over to the client's office and pulled it up and ready to show him off. And big reveal, I'm looking for my praise that I did a great job. And his response was, "That's a great visual, but what am I looking at?" I had made a rookie mistake, and I had not put a title on my viz. So I had this great graph that was accurate. It was the right data. It was beautiful, but I didn't actually title it, so the user did not know what he was looking at. That's a big fail. So, how do we judge our work? Well, with IronViz 5-point scale, and we've got the different areas, it's very similar at work, actually. So, we have design, same exact thing as IronViz. Is it easy to navigate? Is it user-friendly? Are the fonts legible? All that kind of stuff is still important in work, just as it is in IronViz. The difference with work, though, is typically, we're not necessarily just doing that one-time essay type visualization dashboard. We're typically looking to build a tool that's going to be used to answer customer questions. So first and foremost, are we meeting those customer requirements? Are we answering their questions at a glance? It's not something typically that it's just a one-time data set. It's something that's going to be used on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So is the customer, is the client able to filter and work with their results? The last piece, analysis is again a little bit different than we saw in IronViz. Typically we have to be forthright and answer questions like, when was the data refreshed? How current is that data? Do the numbers seem reasonable? If you kind of show up with a dashboard that says the company had $100 billion in sales in front of the CFO, he's going to know in an instant whether that number is correct or not, and he'll call you out on it immediately if it's not aligning with his expectations. The other thing that we have to do on a work dashboard typically is provide enough detail so that the end users can drill down and typically see the tables. It's sad, I know. They're probably taking those tables and exporting them to Excel, but that's the business world, and that's what we have to do as analysts, is provide enough detail so that they can use that data that we're working with. And so, how do we judge our work? It's not necessarily a 5-point scale. It's maybe a little bit more binary than that. If the CFO loves the dashboard, he's going to push everybody else in the organization to use it. He's going to come back to you. He's going to look for more questions to be answered. If you, depending on the client, if it's a fail, you may not get a chance to iterate. If it's not answering the questions that they're looking for, doesn't give the detail desired. You want to kind of go in when you get it to the client, best foot forward and show them, a super high quality product right from the start. Iterate on top of that and make it even better, so that you have that great success. So, how can we create and customize our best practice checklist? Like I said in my example there, we started with the IronViz judging criteria internally. So I kind of took that. I created a draft. I also did some Google searches for dashboard checklist and looked at what was out there on the internet and took a few things from that as well. So I put a bunch of stuff together in a draft. But it's really important that you work with your team. So again, back to iterating, work with your colleagues. So some of the stuff that I put on the initial checklist, it got axed. When my colleagues looked at it, they added other things. There were discussions that happened, debates, maybe you might want to call them, about certain things that went into the checklist. It's all super healthy and super good because it's going to produce a better quality checklist at the end of the day. The other thing I want to mention here is just like, if you're working with a new client, you may want to make a client-specific version of the checklist. So, internally we have our standard checklist that we kind of start with, but we've also created client-specific versions of that. And typically that gets into things like client branding and some of the requirements that they might have that are different than some of the other clients that we work with. The other thing is just to share, give back to the data fam. So that's, I'm here today to kind of give back to you guys. It's not super secret sauce. You can give it to your clients. It shows that, you're super thoughtful and you're thinking about these things, and just better to sell your services and show the client that you know what you're doing and you're super skilled. So definitely share the checklist and don't just kind of keep it to yourself, is what I'd encourage. So, I don't have forever here today. So this is just some of the highlights from the checklist. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail when I present this at Tableau conference, but I want to point out some of the key things, for me at least, that are in our checklist. Measures are checked, and key numbers in different tabs are aligning. So this is a really kind of important thing that you've gone and you've created dozens of different tabs in your workbook. You've created 3 or 4 dashboards. Just make sure everything's aligning with each other. So here's a great simple example. I made a ban. I put the month to date hours, and then I made a detail table that breaks it down by person. And then went on and did the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and eventually you come back and you look at this and you say, wait a second, those aren't aligning with each other, right? This is a checklist kind of can come in and say, you need to go back and double check those things on all of your tabs in your workbook, just to make sure everything's aligning with each other, so that you don't have those kind of mistakes. When we talk about style and branding, the thing that, this is not in IronViz, this is in the work one, but, think about how it's going to be displayed. I'm presenting to you guys here from I think it's a 32-inch 4K screen. Like, it's a huge screen with lots of resolution. People don't have 4K screens typically, or they don't have big, huge screens. They're, especially on a work computer, you might be on a 1K monitor. It doesn't have, really good color accuracy, those kind of things. You really have to think about who's going to be consuming your dashboard and what kind of monitor they're on. And what the one that we kind of put into our checklist is typically we're building at about a 1800 by 1000 fixed size for our dashboards, because that will fit on a 1K monitor. You won't have to scroll left to right. You may have to scroll up and down a little bit if you're making it taller, but scrolling left to right is a pain. If a lot of your clients are using iPads, make sure you do a mobile layout or account for that when you're designing your dashboard. So my example here, I took this screenshot on my 4K monitor as an example of, a bit of a made up one, but, in English, we're typically looking at something we read top to bottom, left to right. So when you have this up on your screen, you're focused up in this top left corner here, looking at time entry details. But, you never really realize that, you never really realize that there's filters up there in the top right, because I'm spending all my time looking in the top left. So this is something, again, you need to kind of think about, the end user's monitor and what they're going to see. It's a 5-second change in Tableau Desktop, of course, to kind of put those filters on side. And it just makes it a much nicer experience for the users to have to not move their mouse across the screen, to not have to move their head to the right when they're working with their filters. The next one here, a little bit about naming conventions. Think about, you're using Tableau Desktop, but the consumers are typically going to be using the web. Make sure you have descriptive tab names, and where possible, use your tab names as the titles on your dashboards, so it's easier for the users to navigate. The other one that I want to kind of highlight on here is, access headers are useful or removed. For example, here, very simple line. We turned on the mark labels for every mark there. So everything's labeled. You don't really need that score axis that's highlighted. It's just redundant information. It adds clutter to your visualization. So you could take that out and you'll just have a nice cleaner viz to look at. So things like that, they're in the checklist just so you think about them. Some of them could be an NA, right? Like it might not be check or X, it might be not applicable. But at least you've kind of thought about that as you go through the checklist and said whether it's relevant or not. The next one here, talk about understandability and navigation. Lots of times we're having upfront conversations with clients to say, what are the abbreviations we're going to use? What are the names we're going to use for these calculations? This is not necessarily a made up example. Case number, case no, case num, case pound, they're all the same thing. I've seen workbooks where like all of those are in use in different tabs where people are renaming stuff all over the place. Those are the kind of things that you want to put into your data source, decide with it up front, and make sure that that's consistent in everything you do. So when somebody's looking at it, they're going to know what to look for. The other thing here too is, if you're renaming stuff all over the place, it makes it a little bit more of a nightmare for people to maintain it and work with it. So if you had to hand it off to somebody else, and they're seeing all of these different, naming conventions for the same field, it can be confusing and make more work for them. The next one here, this is, the Tableau pound signs in your data tables. In the checklist, we have an item that says, is everything legible? You're not seeing any pound signs. A lot of times this can come from if you're testing with sample data, not necessarily real data, and you're not sizing things appropriately. Wherever possible, use real data or close to real data when you're actually doing your building, so that you don't kind of experience this once it goes into production and gets connected up to real data. The other thing that can happen that can lead to this is that, when you're testing out stuff, if you have a bunch of filters, try different settings in your filters and see how the dashboard renders with different filters applied to it. Try to break it, try to make it look not correct, and then you're going to kind of mimic what the user experience is, because as soon as you release this and publish this to them, they're going to play with those filters. They're going to try all the different possible values, and you want to make sure that they see good results when they do. The last one here on understandability and navigation that I want to point out is tips. This is one of my pet peeves, and this is where people may disagree with me, but I would be really happy if Tableau turned off tooltips by default. And my kind of thing is that I go through when I'm creating new tabs, and I'll just turn off the tooltips as a kind of a habit now as I create new things. I say, only turn them on when you're showing additional and useful information. In the example here, it's a data table, so you can kind of see if I'm hovering over a cell, that tooltip pops up. It has no new information. It's just repeating stuff that's already available in the view, but it's also hiding a bunch of data behind it. So it makes it maybe more difficult for users to work with that view because those tooltips kind of get in their way. So again, back to the checklist, think about when your tooltips should be turned on and whether they're relevant or not. The last one here that I wanted to point out is just when you're getting ready to publish and get this to a wider audience, making sure that you're removing unnecessary tabs. In a published workbook, we shouldn't see any of this sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, sheet 5, sheet 6. You should be removing those tabs if it's a debug view or it's a prototype view that you're just using for your own purposes. You can hide them. The other thing is just clean up unused calculated fields, again, for maintainability. If somebody else has to take that and work with it in the future, if you have a bunch of calculated fields in your workbook that aren't getting used, it's just going to make their life more difficult. It might make your life more difficult if you go back, a year later and can't remember which ones you were using. So just kind of clean up before you get ready to publish it and share it a little bit more widely. So that's kind of building the checklist. Now, how can we integrate the checklist into the workflow? And really, you should be thinking about your checklist right from the very beginning. So, when you start building your dashboards, you can be thinking about the checklist. And then when you go back at the end and go to complete the checklist, you've kind of already thought about this. And as you do it more and more, it's going to become second nature. You're going to do it, autopilot. You're going to turn off those tooltips without even thinking about it. And then when it becomes time to do the checklist, it's already going to be done. So the first thing is, when do you need to complete the checklist? Well, I'd say before you show anyone, right? So you've done a bunch of work on this, complete the checklist before you show it to anybody else. The other thing is to go back and do the checklist after making major changes. Like maybe you have to go back and rework the data source and you're swapping out data sources in your workbook. You should go back and do the full checklist, retest all those action filters, retest all, the filters in your dashboard, make sure none of your calculated fields have turned red, kind of go through every tab and complete that checklist. It doesn't hurt. The other one is peer review. So, have a colleague review your work. If I would have shown my chart without a title to somebody internally before I showed the client, I would have saved some headache there. So before you show the client, for sure, make sure you have somebody else get eyes on your dashboard. Also ahead of any major milestones or deliveries, make sure you're getting that peer review redone if necessary, so that you've gotten someone that is not going to give you a fail, someone that's going to give you constructive feedback and help you to make that better product before you share it more widely. And then the other one is getting the client involved. You can give them the checklist and ask them to complete it. They may not want to go through and complete everything, but it's a really good thing to show your client that you've actually gone through and completed this checklist. You've had a colleague complete the checklist as well. So you've done that quality work before you've given it to the client. And that's a way to show them that you've done that. And then they can have better faith in you as an analyst that you've done what what you're supposed to do as part of your job. And then at the end of the day, kind of relating this back, you've done all this work, you've created the checklist, you've completed it multiple times on your dashboard. Who's the winner? Well, you're the winner. So, at work, your colleagues will see and appreciate that you've done a really good job and you've delivered really high quality product. If you're competing at IronViz, you're going to be kind of the one that's on the stage and presenting to that and potentially the grand champion of IronViz. So, I hope that, the stuff I've shared with you today is something that you can use in your own projects. So this QR code is a sample. It's that Word document that I showed right at the beginning. If you want to download that, copy and paste it into your own and customize it for your own purposes, that's the sample that you can use for that. So that's that. The other one is it's not too late to sign up for Tableau conference. If you haven't signed up already, just earlier this week, they kind of came out with this discount code. So if you haven't registered yet, you can still get a discount on the registration fee. If you want to attend my session, the longer version of this, there's the QR code. It's actually going to be offered twice. I mentioned at the top of this, I have presenting on Tuesday. I also have a certification exam on Tuesday that I haven't studied for. So it's going to be a very busy Tableau conference this year, but I'm super looking forward to it. So thank you, everyone, for listening. I think I probably have some extra time here, so we can do some question and answer. If you want to post that in the chat. There probably are questions, so I'll just switch over there.
Yeah, we have some question, Fraser. Will you be possible to also give me like the link to the QR code that you share, so I will be able to put it on the resources when I will send the email of the Word. So we have 3 questions for.
Oh, yes, the illustrations are all done with AI. I was doing a lot of prompt engineering. I some of them I had in the prompt. I said I wanted like a cute anime character, and then the AI was giving me all female characters, so I dropped the cute because I think the AI was a little bit gender biased in that way when I said cute. But yeah, is there questions?
Yeah, it's almost all about if you can share again the QR code. Is your checklist something you can share? A lot of interest.
Yeah. Okay. So you got the QR code. Yeah. I would love to have a conversation. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I know that there's a lot of debate about fixed versus automatic sizing on dashboards and like what the correct size for dashboards should be. So I really enjoy kind of having those conversations. Is the data set provided upfront for the IronViz? So for the qualifying rounds in IronViz, you're allowed to use whatever data you want. The only thing for the qualifying in IronViz is that you have to align with the theme. So I think 2 years ago the theme was love. I'm blanking on what the theme was this year. Some people create their IronVizes ahead of time. They start working on them ahead of even like the announcement of the theme and then kind of shoehorn it into the theme a little bit, it seems like. But if it's a really good high quality viz, then that's as long as it aligns with the theme and they're pretty generic, it'll be good in IronViz. So that's how that one works. Title should align with the tab name. Yeah, so, sometimes that's not always possible that the title should align with the tab name. It's more, I think, that you want to think about like the name of the tab is also when you're navigating in Tableau Cloud, they'll go to the workbook and then they'll see the tab names listed, depending if they're doing thumbnails or if they're doing like a list view. And so if you're doing thumbnails, and we don't know what the user is going to have in their view, right? So if they're doing thumbnails, they can go by the thumbnail to pick the right one. But, lots of times I'm switching out a thumbnail view and I'm showing just the list of the titles. So, you got to name those tabs so that the user that's got just the list of titles can find what they're looking for quickly. Lots of times we're actually adding additional stuff into the title as well. So if you've got, I didn't talk about this, but one of the other things that we have in the checklist is things like if we've got hidden filters on your views, the user doesn't necessarily have a way to know about those hidden filters. So it's actually a good practice to kind of put those hidden filters into your titles. So that the user knows that you've said, I'm only including invoices, I'm not including credit memos and things like that. It's best to document that as part of your dashboard or in your titles. Okay, yeah, I'll grab the link to the example and I'll put it in the chat. Once the other presenters start, I'll have to go and find it because all I did was make the QR code and didn't keep the link around.
Yeah, you have another question about development standard and checklist, or about another one also from Scott Eaton that speak. Do you include your checklist data model standard?
We don't really include a lot about the data model stuff in the checklist because the checklist is more centered on like Tableau desktop and like the dashboard and the views. A lot of times, we're actually we work with a lot of the same data. And so we actually have like separate standards where we've kind of developed standard data sources and naming conventions in our data sources. So it's not necessarily part of our checklist, but we've still done that as part of our work. So, my example of like number, no, num, and pound sign, our standard is that we use the word number. And part of the reasoning behind that is if, an end user is like in Tableau desktop and they're searching num, they're going to get num or number show up. So it's the most unambiguous term that we can use is just the full word number. Sometimes in table views, it'll get cut off. The other thing that we do is we typically have the descriptor in front of the word number. So it would be like case number. Number case doesn't make sense in English, but you kind of get where I'm going, is that like case number, if the word number gets cut off because of space, it's actually okay. Because you can still see the word case. It's the most important thing. So, especially when we're dealing with financial stuff, and we'd say like balance amount kind of implies that that's a number, it's a currency, data type, but we put that at the end. So again, if it gets cut off, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Same thing like the word date. Somebody that's really anal about their data sources may want to have the word date in front of all the dates so that they line up nicely when they're in a view, but that's actually probably not good, because then you're cutting off, what the date is. So having date at the back is always kind of better that way. So some of those kind of naming conventions, yeah, we have those, but those aren't necessarily in that checklist, because we do it at the data source before we get to the checklist.
No, that was very interesting. Thank you very much, Fraser. Don't forget to put the link. Otherwise,
yeah, I'll go and get that right now. Well, Chimdi is presenting, yeah.
And then the second speaker of today is Chimdi, the man, the legend. 14 V's of the day. You deserve a prize. Maybe you will have a visit this year.
Oh
no, it's a shame. Now I'm making blush. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Okay, I guess I'll share my screen again, and then, yeah. No. Yes.
You can start your own presentation, Chimdi.
Yeah, because I guess the intro that's here is basically the same intro as before. So, the presentation is basically just a Makeover Monday showcase. Essentially, we had one of our people sadly drop out last minute. So Annabelle reached out and it's like, hey, can someone do something? I was like, maybe we can talk about Makeover Monday, do a quick, a slow hanging fruit there. So that's what I'll be doing today. It's probably going to be really quick and short, but happy to do this as well. So I'll just jump right into my presentation screen and we can go from there. All right. So are we able to see the screen?
Yes, I can see MakeoverMonday showcase.
Beautiful. Thank you. So like I said, today I'm just going to do a quick, walkthrough of one of my Makeover Monday visits. I really love Makeover Monday, and it's one of like I said, it was my first introduction into the data fam. And ever since I got busy with the data viz career, Makeover Monday is the one area that has kind of helped me with respect to practicing my skill set, experimenting with different design styles, and sharing with the community. So I'm really passionate about this, and I'm really happy to be associated with it. And so for today, I'm just going to do a quick intro into what Makeover Monday is for those who aren't too familiar with it. And then I'm going to jump right into the viz for the specific week in the showcase that we're looking at. From there, I'm just going to show and highlight some other submissions from the community, because apart from participating, one of the greatest aspects of this weekly challenge is getting to see how other people think through the challenge, how they explore the analysis, and how they visualize their own takes on things. And so for this week, I'll be highlighting just showing 2 or 3 or 4 of the submissions, so you can kind of see the diverse ranges and thought processes and how we all express ourselves through this. And then just a quick close after that fact. And so just talking about Makeover Monday, what exactly is Makeover Monday? So that viz, which I'm going to show why did I do it, right? Makeover Monday is a weekly community challenge that exists among all the other challenges that are out there. And it was created in 2016. So it's one of the more long-running challenges. And the initial intent is basically just get in there. We have opportunities to do work with respect to data viz analysis, like everything on that front. But of course, if you want to sort of experiment and just have a free reign with things, then of course you can come in here. And originally, you know, there were aspects of it that there was a really large teaching component where there's like viz reviews, and you know, they would sort of talk through, here's what works with this viz and here's what doesn't work with this viz. That isn't quite there right now, just because of, you know, the circumstances in which the co-hosts, me, Irene, and Harry, were like all working full time. And so, you know, dedicating the time to go that deep isn't quite there. But of course, Andy, who was like the original creator, he still has a lot of the teaching aspect going on his YouTube channel with his Viz with Me, where he approaches these and just does it all live for people to see. So stuff you can check out with that. And like I said, the whole goal is to grow and hone our skills in data visualization. So how that works is every week we're presented with an article or some kind of introduction to the viz, where you can sort of see the thought process or the subject matter and get some context with that. And then a specific chart or viz or infographic related to that topic is provided. And the goal is to essentially recreate that viz in whatever way you like, however your strategy is. But the goal is, you know, let's basically communicate as best as we can to inform the general public about the subject at hand. And so generally, in terms of participation, there's a new challenge posted every Monday, or I guess sometimes Sunday, depending on your time zone. And then you have an entire week to work through things. But you know, the cool thing is that even though we post something weekly, like if you don't feel like participating in the current week's challenge, you can go 10, like 5, 6, however long, you know, back into the past. All the data sets are hosted on, you know, data.world and MakeoverMonday. I think as of right now, there are about 300 plus data sets which you can access and work with. And so, you know, the whole goal is to just share your work, engage with the data fam, connect with people, see their own approaches. And we tend to encourage a lot of like discussions and commenting, where it's like you can kind of learn things from other people, share yourself, be inspired, and just kind of live within that community spirit while actually getting to do something productive with yourself. You know, the final thing about it is that it's open to everyone. So you'll find people who are not even yet working in the space yet. They can be partaking in Makeover Monday, and they're using that opportunity to build out their portfolios, to share their work, to sort of create visibility around some of the ways that they do things. And through that mechanism, you can find people literally getting a startup in the field by participating in things like this. And then on the other side, you have people like Andy Kerbel, who is like a world-renowned database expert, like in fact, the expert of all experts, I would say. And he still participates in this as well. And so, you know, the cool thing about it is you're never going to be alone in terms of where you're at. There's always someone at the same level, but then you can also see those who have gone ahead of you to sort of be inspired by them and learn some of the strategies that they're using when they are going through to analyze and visualize and present information. So that's kind of like what the whole concept of Makeover is about. We do have a website, which is right there, makeovermonday.co.uk. So you can check it out a bit more and see what we have to offer. And of course, we're always welcoming new people to the community. Come in, we're always here for you. And now moving on to the specific week in question. This showcase was from last year, week 45. And the data was basically originally hosted on World Bank Group, which, by the way, is another amazing source of free data and a lot of, you know, subjects and analysis being done on, you know, important subjects around the world. So you can definitely check that out as well. For this week, with respect to highlighting the topic at hand, the topic is, actually, I should have even written that there. It's about global internet access. And so what you're looking at here is a map, which I failed on one of those checklist items because you don't know what you're looking at. So I'm going to tell you what you're looking at. It's a map showing different countries and the internet penetration across these countries, aka how many people in these countries have access to the internet. And so when you look at this viz, you can see that they've drawn a simple map, and then they've utilized just the color shading to highlight the different percentages across the different countries as a way to sort of give you some sort of pattern in the data. And then at the bottom, you can see there that there's a slider where you can actually move it back and forth, and it allows you to see what's been going on over the past years, right? So this view is the most current year, but you can sort of, step backwards in time to kind of see what's going on here. And I wanted to show this because obviously it's the inspiration for the submission that I created, but more importantly, it's actually, even though my design looks very different, there's a lot of foundational themes which I took from this and just sort of expanded upon it in a different way. And so here's a picture of mine. I essentially moved away from the basic map to more of a tile map. And the main indicator of the patterns that are occurring in the data are encoded with the colors. And I've added like a year timeline, which you can use to filter through all the years. And so basically, to dig deeper into how I expanded upon all of that stuff we just saw, I'm going to switch over to the live version of the Viz and just do a quick walkthrough, because I always find those to be a lot more straightforward and easy when diving deep into visualizations. So I'm going to change my view now, and we're going to hop onto Tableau Public and get going with that. So actually, I'll stop sharing and I'll reshare. Sorry, 1 second. Okay.
I thought it was only me who mess up when I share my screen.
Not at all. I'm
Thank
still
you.
like amateur sometimes with this stuff. I'm actually surprised at myself.
It has to happen sometime.
Yeah, exactly. I have been doing a lot of, I don't have enough. Okay. So
Yeah,
please
now
let
we
me
can
know.
see. Yes.
Beautiful. So this is the actual live viz. It's on my profile, so you can check it out there. And I guess just running through things, the first thing you can see that we have the title on the far left here, which obviously, because of how the human eyes orient data and information, you're usually going to see a title on the left. It's just titled Internet Access. And of course, to expand upon that, so like, what about internet access? We have a subtitle there where it just lets you know, hey, this is the percentage of the population using the internet, right? And so the whole structure of this is basically we have a bunch of information stuff up here, controls, summary, and layout. So moving from left to right, basically we have this text basically just talking about what the visualization is about, because again, just when you think about what the goal of all this stuff is, we aim to inform. And so even though we can sometimes say like, yeah, it'll be pretty without the text, but I like to add in a very quick short summary that just lets you know what you're looking at. So in this case, this visual highlights the percentage of the population using the internet across different countries worldwide, and letting you know that the data spans from 2003 to 2022. And so we move on here. We have, the color legend, which I utilize the color as the major informant here. And so the goal is to highlight the percentage of penetration across these countries using this color quartiles here. So we have less than 25%, greater than 25, less than 50, greater than 50, less than 75, and of course, greater than 75 and less than 100. And so as far as the legend, I also just incorporated like another tile here, letting you know what you're looking at. So you can see that the 3 letters on each tile, that's the country code in question, and the numbers are part of the population, right? And so we can see now this little thing here. So I have another legend letting you know that this is just the number of countries. And then we have the controls. So we're analyzing that information across different dimensions. And we have the base view, which is looking at things by the region. And so essentially the whole goal is to say, okay, let's analyze this information from a regional perspective. Why? Because generally speaking, internet is a service, right? And so, you know, in able to create that access, there's going to be factors like, you know, policy from the government, for example, you know, subsidizing, you know, providers to create more access. There's got to be things like infrastructure of the country, because again, we need the infrastructure to be able to actually provide the actual service. And so with that thinking in mind, we're going to understand, and we have an understanding that in different parts of the world, there's just going to be different levels of development and different approaches to this. And so the regional analysis just felt like it was relevant here. And so starting off with the regional portion here, and just so we know, this is analyzing the most recent data, 2022, and you can kind of move back in time to see the other previous years, which I'll show later, and also use that to highlight some other things about this design here. Here we can kind of hide and show the labels, mainly because, you know, even as you look at this, you can definitely see that there's a lot of information. And sometimes, you know, for some people, it might be overload. So you can kind of turn off those percentage labels. And you kind of are still getting to see the pattern just because of the way the color has been structured. And you can also even see, just while I'm doing this, there's a lot of interactivity that just makes things, you know, sit more with you. So if I hover on this tile here for less than 25% range, you can already see that everything sort of pulls back and only those are highlighted. If I move to less than, you know, greater than 25, less than 50, you can see those highlighted, and so on and so forth. And so right off the bat, right, we can see that for each region, we've kind of laid out the summary. So we've got 50 countries, which is 27.3% of the countries for this year. And in that country, we can see that one of them is in that lower 50% range. One is in greater than 75, and one is in that upper quartile, right? You hover, and the same thing goes across for all the regions there. And so that's like the high level summary, where you can kind of see at the regional level, what does that penetration look like? And you can compare that across the different regions to kind of see like overall where the things lay. Like, for example, in North America, all the countries are in that upper quartile with more than 75% of their population having access. But then you can see somewhere like sub-Saharan Africa, where, you know, there is actually a majority of the countries that don't have that, you know, access. And so going from that top level, now we're able to actually look at it at a country level. And so the pattern is actually really clear, right? We can see that in 2022, majority of the countries in this grid, they all have access, where more than 50% of the population has access. But you're going to see a very big exception here, where sub-Saharan Africa, which we just talked about, in this region, actually majority of the people have no access, where less than 50% penetration is what we're looking at here. And so obviously you can do those comparisons across the regions and see like, okay, for the more developed places, there's higher access, and places that are a little less developed, there's going to be less access. And then now moving away from the individuals, you can now look at a summary at the bottom as well, which just kind of pulls it all together, where for this 2022, there are a total of 183 countries in this grid. And you can see the number of each country that falls within the different zones there just by using those colors. And then to sort of like give an idea of what's possible, you know, in terms of access, we can see that there are 4 countries in this year that where everyone has access to the internet. So you can hover on these countries, and then you can now begin to see, okay, this is where, you know, this is where everyone should be aiming for and where everyone is aiming for. And just by doing all of this, we can have now a general perspective of what's happening. But of course, when you look at stuff like this, you're now getting curious about, what about the individual countries and how are they faring, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where when, for example, we look at Bahrain, we look at it, we hover on here, and then we can now see like the individual stats. So I utilize the tooltip here to kind of give that extra detail for those who want to dive even deeper. And so I'm just like layering that information in a way where it's like, you have so much to consume, but it's being presented in a way that is not going to be overwhelming. So you're not getting it all up front, but you can dig deeper to see what's happening. So for each style tooltip, there's a map for each country. I just thought that would be a cool design factor so that we don't completely let go of the map, the original map from the beginning. And then in there, it tells you the region in which this country resides. And then it gives you an overall percentage number for how many people within that country have access. And so you can see that these 4 countries here, they're all overall number ones because everyone has access. And then you can hover and see somewhere like Kuwait, where overall it's ranked 6th, but in this region is ranked 5th. Then you can look at, say, somewhere like here, Burundi. You can see their sub-Saharan African region. They're obviously in the lowest quartile. Only 11.3% of people have access, and they're the least ranked for the overall data set. But in the region, they're ranked, 45th out of 45th. So that's kind of just like now a much more robust way of getting to that information about the internet access. And then, just a few extra things that I added, which I thought would be helpful. In the data, we were given some certain classifications there to see like how those people have access. So for example, in this little right section here, this is where, again, when I'm building tools, I like to provide some of that, summary information to highlight what's going on. I'm going to try to highlight the pattern as much as possible. And I'm trying to like tell some kind of story with that. But in addition to that, I will usually try to give an opportunity for you to actually answer some of your own questions that may come up as a result of you seeing that stuff. So down here, you can now begin to answer some of the questions where, okay, this specific countries, how do they compare to the classifications? And here you can see USA compared to the world. And the way I've laid it out is basically you have an area chart for the country that you're selected. And the classification is just like that line that runs through the middle. We have arrows with numbers attached to them, and that just lets you know the percentage higher or below in terms of the comparison. And to activate a country within this lower portion, all we're having to do is basically click the country. So you can see what's going on with the country in the tooltip. And then you can actually now look down here to see how that's doing. So for example, in 2022, what this tells us is that Yemen, the penetration level in Yemen is 47% less than the world average. You can also kind of run through other things, like let's say in the Arab world, for example, it's 50% less than the average in the Arab world, and so on and so forth. You can just kind of run through all of those. You click your country, and then you can kind of see how that comparison lies. And like, obviously what you're going to see is more than likely what you're expecting to see. So like if we were to click somewhere like the USA, which we had before, you're going to know that, of course, the USA having a very high developed infrastructure and where the policy around internet is like, there's so much access there. It makes sense that, the world average is like USA is 33% higher than the world average, for example. Whereas a country like Burundi, which is like at the bottom, is like 53% less than the world average there. So this just kind of gives that additional confirmation where you're able to just analyze each country individually in a different way. And then speaking of, how things have evolved over time, one of the cool things which I like about, utilizing this color, basically we have the purples, whereas indicating like the high access, and then, the oranges / yellow, whatever that color is, indicating like the lower access. And so when you look at the 2022, right, which is the most recent year, you can see that, yes, majority of companies have that purple indicator showing that majority of companies have that high access. But where do we start from, right? What if we go back to 2003? What is it going to look like? And you're going to notice another different pattern. So now here we see that actually majority of the purple is gone. And now you can see that as in this year, majority of people actually had less than 50% of the population. In fact, less than 25%, majority of countries had that level of penetration. And so it just tells a story of development and evolution, wherein from 2003, there weren't that many. And in 2002, you can see a lot of improvement in where we're going. And then, if we look at a different level of analysis, the second place I looked at was, okay, do income groups have anything to do with that penetration and internet access? And so if we click on the income group, it's going to switch that layout where we can now see the countries, exact same countries that we saw previously, but laid out differently. And of course, when we look at this, we can see that majority of the countries in this year, they still, we can still recognize that they have that higher than 50% penetration. But then you look over here in the high income countries, and you're going to notice that majority of these countries, actually more than 75% of them have access, and only one, which is just below 75. So obviously, you're now going to understand very clearly that income does in fact have a very big role to play in how this access works. You look at the upper middle income countries, they still have the high access. But once you get into the lower middle income countries, then you're going to notice that there's like a 50-50 where, a good amount of them have more than 50%, but a lot of them have less than 50%. And then, of course, in the low income countries, that's an entirely different pattern where only one of the countries has greater than 50%, and it's just low 50s, whereas everyone else is in those two lower quartiles there. So again, we're looking at the same information, but through a different lens, where we can now understand that in addition to things like, policy and infrastructure, the level of incomes within these countries will also play a factor in whether or not their access to internet is considered high or low. And so with that, essentially, it's I guess I would consider it like a simple topic, but just utilizing that data and information, we're able to basically just lay out a story of what's going on based on region, income, and just using the colors to basically highlight those patterns. Because I find color to be one of the strongest indicators that works well with the human eye, because again, we all see colors for the most part, and we're able to recognize those disparities there. So that's why I utilize that, and I like to use colors a lot to highlight data points and stories within my visualization. And that's one of the things too, speaking of color, just like as a side note, I remember when I started with data viz, and it was originally just me using Excel to build visualizations. And I was the dude who would just like, before something got submitted, it's like, oh, give me like 10 minutes with it. And I would just throw on some pretty colors. I'm like, this looks nice. This looks nice. Because back then I actually didn't understand that, and a lot of us don't really think about this at the beginning. We think that design and coloring is just like, let's make it look nice, right? It's amazing, and looking nice is great for you users. But I always find that using color and using these kinds of things strategically is actually where the gold lies, right? So you can make it look nice, but the intent of your color shouldn't be to make it look nice. You should be trying to utilize it to communicate in some way. And in the process of doing that, you can make it look nice. Like, I think this is a pretty nice palette that I've got there with the light purples, the dark purples, the oranges. It does look nice, but looking nice is actually not the primary function of that, but it does work really well in doing the communication there. And so now that we've looked at my submission, that's basically like a few of the things that I thought about when going through this. Like I mentioned before, the beauty about this challenge is like, it's welcome. Anyone is welcome to join it. And so I'm going to touch on a few of the other submissions for this week, so you can sort of see the variety in what other people did, which I genuinely believe is part of the value of this challenge. Is we're all unique in our own individual ways. And the way we think about things and approach things is always going to be different. And I, for one, always love seeing those submissions. I'm lucky because I get tagged in all the submissions, so I get to see them. But I highly recommend going on Tableau Public and just it's a great source of inspiration, and that's simply because of the diversity of people that are on there and the diversity and uniqueness in their approaches that always come to life in their visualizations. So I'm going to switch to another tab. Can we see the other visualization in front of me?
Yes, internet user expanding over time with a
Beautiful.
Wi-Fi.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, so just right off the bat, you can kind of see a lot of the creativity. This is a submission by Blake. Blake is one of our frequent participants, and we always appreciate his work. I recommend you definitely check out his profile. He's got a lot of awesome stuff that he does there. In his view, he also added different breakdowns. We have a big control here that allows us to basically play the information forward and backward, where you can see that evolution over time. And then we have a filter here that we can filter through. But at the high level, he's got the distribution by income groups, where he has this sort of cool chart where it's just like lines representing each country. But you can also see he's actually also used color in an interesting way, where it's like just a grayscale, but the darker colors are going to be for those with the higher penetration. And you can kind of see, the lower penetration here. So across those different regional groups, you can also see some of a similar pattern there: low income, low penetration; high income, high penetration. Here he's got, same thing, sort of like a sideways histogram, I guess is what I would call it, where he's analyzing, the countries by the user share, and he's got these different bins in 10%, so 0, 10, 20, 30, etc., etc. And then, of course, a map similar to the original map where he's highlighting the percentage of population. So it's just got different ways of showing this at a high level. And I like the fact that, it's not a lot to look at initially, but let's say we start to break it down by region. You can actually see now the individual countries, and it's a lot more digestible. And overall, I thought this was a really cool one for that week. And you have, of course, this little diagram or pictogram or something of a thing emitting signals. I'm not a huge fan of using this kind of stuff in my work, but I like when it contributes to the whole theme of the viz. And in Makeover Monday, there's literally no restrictions for anything, so you can do whatever you like. And I think this worked well. The next one we can check out, I think, is another one here by Ella. Also check out her profile. I think all these people have amazing stuff. This one was kind of nice. You can see that this basically looks like a browser. And so obviously it makes sense that, if we're talking about the internet, introducing a browser design is like great. And so, she has this little arrow here to navigate back and forth into the pages. And, actually, I should probably go back first. So her original page here just gives another tile map where it's a map, but it's I would call this the improved map simply because the countries are like individually placed. She also has a color scheme indicating the range of penetration in each country. And then off the side here, she has more of like a summary to kind of get a gist of what's happening. So, by population, of course, high, very high, high, medium, low, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the count of the countries. And then you can see the color codes basically utilized as well to communicate that. She's highlighted the top 5 and the bottom 5, which is another way of basically just, giving sort of those extremes of the data. On her next view over here, you can sort of see this, what is this called? Basically, I forgot what this chart is called. Slope chart. But essentially, this just highlights, the change from start to finish. It's a very good way of kind of seeing like who has improved and, if there anybody that has decreased. So you can just click on the lines, right? I love interactive visits because they just make it easy. And then of course, same thing, she's highlighting, like this whole concept, this whole view is more about the changes as opposed to the, static view in that specific year. So she's highlighting again, top 5 and bottom 5 with respect to, who has changed, who has improved. And it looks like some have decreased, unfortunate, but that's just reality, et cetera, et cetera. So it's another submission. Again, it's very unique in its approach, but still very informative. And again, just a different way of showing things. Another one here by Suvojit. I find this one interesting. It's like on the creative side of things, we can still see what's going on. In terms of, the chart selection, I think a lot of this, again, like we said, it's more on the experimental side. So you can kind of see, the average usage across time and how that's basically just displaying that it's going up. You can kind of see the difference across countries. So start year, latest year, you can see like who has improved the most and et cetera, et cetera. So a different kind of analysis there, like announcing a similar way, but in a different chart type. And then here I can kind of see the progression across each country, kind of showing just the growth overall, just in access. And then, of course, you can filter through. So, with 183 countries alone in the most previous year, you can basically start to look through. So if you click here, you're looking at another set of countries that go from like A to E. So it's just another way of grouping things, which I found interesting. I've never tried stuff like this before, but again, it's just another creative way of doing that stuff. And then finally, this one was one that it just looks at like it just wants to highlight the overall explosive growth. So you can see here that we have just the year and the world average, and from 1990, up until like here, it's just like less than 1%. And then you can start to see like these are all countries, right? Again, like I said, this is all experimental. And so, the bigger, what do we call this? Whatever, the waves or the whatever, the bigger, as the years progresses, it just gets larger. So again, it's just letting you know, again, a different way of showing that the growth has just explosively grown over time with more people getting access. It's just like a one-page viz, top level, but again, it still tells an interesting story about what we've been looking at over there. So I hope this has kind of been something that's been helpful for you to see. Essentially, I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk through my design process. And I do confess that when I'm building, I usually just like jumping and then start building. I don't plan. So I always appreciate opportunities to actually now go back in time and actually analyze what I've done, to kind of share that and hope that it kind of helps give you pointers for when you think about designing and creating things and all the numerous ways that exist for us to do that. And so I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to switch back to the other slides, essentially welcoming you to join in the challenge, which I said we host every week. And where's my slides? 1 second here.
You have interesting question. We don't have so much time, but I really love the way you design it, because that's where, you are not taking the area of the country, so much space in the visualization. I really like organized by region. Maybe you can answer one question from...
Cool, sorry. Yeah, I'll answer one.
From Sedal, yeah.
I'll help in
he
the chat.
asked you, so Sedal used to be like one of our organizer in this analytic TUG. So hi Sedal. He asked you, he would love to understand your thought process. What make you decide the title view would be better way to represent the data? What make you think to color code by quartile, for instance?
Sorry, so could you ask that again? I missed the initial part.
Yeah, it's my French accent.
Hello, Jackson.
He would like to understand your thought process. what make you decide, for instance, the tile view would be better way to represent this data, or what make you decide to color code by quartile, for instance?
Okay, yeah, sure, totally. So what made me decide to use the tiles, and what made me decide to color by quartile? So I guess with respect to mapping, I respect and I love, there's a lot of people out there that know how to do amazing things with maps. I'm not one of them. And I find that for me personally, I'm not that great at geography. And so if you ask me to point out things on the map, I can point out stuff like USA, Canada, Nigeria, where I'm from, and some of those common places. Whatever else, I'm not going to know it. And so I don't like to use maps, whereas using a tile map, you can kind of have each thing laid out separately, and then you can have an indicator there for the country code where some of that stuff is intuitive, and so people may have a better and easier time of finding stuff out there simply because of the labels that we can use. Whereas if you've ever tried to label a map before, you're going to get a headache just from looking at that because the overlap is insane. So that's one of the reasons why I did use the tile map, and why I like to use the tile map. It's just far more organized. And while I'm not someone that has OCD, I definitely don't like to have things like on page there. So that's why I use the tile map. Color wise, like I said, color is a really fast way of picking up stuff. And so I just thought that having that split there with higher access in the purples and then lower access in the yellows and oranges, it just makes it a lot easier. Like if you look at the tiles, even if you don't dig deep into each individual country, you can actually sort of see the pattern there because of the color separation that's happening. So that's why I use those color scales. And because it's 100%, it just made sense to break it up into 4 quartiles: 25, 50, 75, 100. Simply because it's a percentage scale. If it was like a numerical scale, I probably may use something different, but this was just an easy choice for me because we're looking at percentages in there. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I suppose it helps.
Okay. Awesome.
Let's introduce Emily, our last speaker today.
Awesome. Let me get this going. Share.
Because she's very exciting. She wants to speak. She has a lot of energy.
I'll try my best. I know we have like 30 minutes, so I'll try to do as much as I can.
We are extendable. Once we did 2 hours, 30 minutes. I think it was all.
All good.
Okay.
Oh.
Let me introduce Emily very quickly. Emily is a lover of all things people, data visualization, and storytelling. She's always a beautiful smile, so I really am very excited to hear her about her journey today. So Emily has the honor of being a 3-time global Tableau Unveils competition runner-up, placing ranked 10th in 2020, 7 in 2022, 8 in 2024. I mean, I think I see a clear pattern. Come on here. Emily later won the honor of Data Storyteller Extraordinaire and Viz of the Year at the 2024 Tableau Vizes. And she loves creating TC bracelet. So if you arrive very early in this conversation, this TUG today, we had an extensive conversation about that. I think that you should, Emily, do a TUG, a TUG talk about that. I think it will be very interesting. But today she will talk about a love across the eras, a design deep dive on one of your favorite singers, I suppose.
Exactly. Spoiler alert, it's the Viz that won me the Viz of the Year 2024 Vizzy. So I'm very excited to be here. We have a lot of slides, but I talk very fast. So I'm ready to go. Let me just share my screen. Very excited to be here, and thank you all for having me. Okay, just let me know. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah, we can all see it. Okay, cool. So hey there. Hi, everyone. In case you don't, thank you for the lovely introduction, Annabelle. I'm Emily de Padua. As you can tell, big Swiftie, big fan. But also, I am a 3-time Tableau Public Ambassador. I'm also the co-lead for the Asian and Pacific Islander API TUG. And I was just recently named Visionary in February, which still doesn't feel real. I'm still processing it. But very excited to be here. My day job, I'm a lead data analyst for a reporting and visualization team. I have been loving Tableau since December 2016. So me and Tableau, we're about to hit our 10-year anniversary. Crazy times. Where did the time go? I live in New Jersey in the United States. And then as you all can tell by my photos and my fun little stats, I just really love Taylor Swift's music. No, seriously, I really do.
Excuse me, Emily. I have to ask now. Is it a real picture? It's you with Taylor Swift?
I wish. No, but that's Gracie Abrams. It's a meme. It's a meme, but I felt so represented by Gracie Abrams in that moment. I was like, she's all of us. But I do have the stats to show. Yeah, Taylor Swift's world, and I'm just existing in it. 5 years running where she's my top Spotify artist in my Spotify rap. So it's been almost as long as my relationship to Tableau at this point. But what am I here to talk about? I'm here to talk about my Iron Viz entry for 2024 theater, which the theme was love. The Viz is called Love Across the Eras, and it was developed from October 2, 2023 through October 31, 2023, so about 4 weeks. It ultimately placed 8th in the top 10. And so what did I do? I analyzed how Taylor Swift uses the word love lyrically across her entire song catalog. At the time of creation, she only had 10 albums. And then less than 6 months after I finished this Viz, she had 11. So she's not stopping, and neither am I. And then I'm just going to drop a link to the Viz, because you can see here, you can scan it if you want to follow along on your phone. But in the meantime, I'm just going to do a quick little demo of what it looks like. This is the Viz. It's a long form Viz. You can see I start out with opening just like, here are all the songs that we're including. I do a whole deep dive on what percentage of the album has at least one usage of the word love in each of its songs. The share of that. Even ones where like love shows up in the title. Then I go into a Sankey diagram that kind of breaks out into how she sings about love. Like, does she only use the word love in songs about love? And turns out, no, sometimes she uses love in different ways. Sometimes it's a breakup song and she's talking about love. From there, I then pull from the Spotify API. Spotify has this metric called emotion balance, which kind of captures each track's like how positive to negative it is. And I did this because there's a tradition in Taylor Swift's music where the 5th track of every album is supposed to be her most emotional, vulnerable song. For the whole album itself, it's a fan tradition, a pattern that fans notice, and then she carries it on into each of her albums. And you can actually see here that how that's reflected, because track 5 noticeably has a lower average balance compared to all the different tracks across all, at the time, 10 albums. From there, then I kind of go album by album, a true Swiftie love letter, album by album, from debut to Fearless, Speak Now, Red, all the way until the latest at the time, Midnights, which was at the time her most recent album. From there, after I tied them all together, comparing it era specific of the usage of the word love to its Spotify balance score, then I finally tie it all together and make a commentary as a whole on her catalog. It was quite the endeavor. I want to say it was the most intense 4 weeks of my life, which I say about every Iron Viz ended. I would love to include Tortured Poets department. I just haven't had the brain space. Also, 11 is a hard cut to do versus like, I think I might be waiting till TS 12. So it's a little more even to do. Yeah, a little more even to do. I use every inch. This viz is 10,000 pixels tall. So I use every space that I could afford. So with that little demo, feel free to kind of go along, explore the viz, but I'm just going to kind of open the curtain behind and kind of walk you all through the development, the story of this viz, how it came together and everything. So first off, for the 2024 Iron Viz feeder, I'm so glad I was on the same call as Fraser, because Fraser gave you all a perspective of what judging is like from a judge, which means Fraser is also the person I got to yell at about my scores. Just kidding. I would never yell about my scores. It's a fun little game. But I'm going to talk to you about the perspective of someone who's entered it. And so here, you know, I'm including the judging criteria, which we can go through. Oh, Fraser, we have words then. Fraser just confirmed. He did judge mine. So I want to know. Okay. So I'm just going to call out though, because this is not my first time entering Iron Viz, that there were 4 specific criteria that I really wanted to focus on. I wanted to be conscious of my color palette. I really wanted to do a broad analysis using as much of Tableau's capabilities as possible. So I wanted to build as much in Tableau as I possibly could. I wanted to be very conscious of the story flow because it's such a broad topic and so close to me that I wanted to try and do it justice. And then I ultimately wanted to be complex. I kind of wanted to approach it as like an academic study because that's the kind, to me, that's the kind of depth and analysis that like Taylor Swift's art deserves. And I wanted to do one of my musical heroes justice. But then I also had my own kind of personal agendas, because something I love about entering Iron Viz is that you are in the driver's seat. You are the #1 consumer of this viz. For us, people who build dashboards for a living and always have to run around and try to focus on the user, sometimes it's hard to just be like, I just want to care about like what I want within the context of the, you know, requirements that I'm trying to build. It's a little easy to kind of lose your sense of self, or at least like even asking yourself, like, what do I want? So what I wanted, design, analysis, and storytelling wise, design-wise, I wanted a long form viz. I wanted to play with QR codes, which I've started playing in my vizes before. I definitely wanted to try new chart types because that's my favorite part of learning in Iron Viz is I get to tackle all the things I'm nervous about, which Chimdi's so real for saying, for talking about maps and kind of being like, oh, I'm not really a map person. Same. I'm also not a map person. And that extends to my avoidance of map layers. So I wanted to get over that fear. I wanted to analyze Taylor Swift's music, ideally use a scatter plot if I could, which we saw I do manage to pull off. And then ultimately for storytelling, I wanted it to be more of an academic study. I wanted it to be about love as in the context of her art and not really about her relationships. Because for me, like I don't love her music because of who she was dating at the time. I love her music because I find it emotionally honest and I think it's very lyrically rich. So I wanted to just focus more on that versus like the muses of her life. And I just wanted it to be a beautiful love letter to being a Swiftie and loving Taylor Swift's music. I've been a fan of Taylor Swift's music for a long time. I've wanted to do a viz about Taylor's music for a long time. And I just, you know, sometimes it's just got to brew in the back of your brain for like a couple of years. And then suddenly it just comes out into the world, which is beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to walk you all through developing the viz. There's about 7 sections. And as I said, I talk very quickly. But we're going to talk about the theme, the data set, inspiration, the color palette, everything and anything. And please feel free to just, any questions, maybe I'm glossing over anything, just shout it out in the Q&A and hopefully we get to it. Cool. Okay, so the theme for the 2024 feeder was love. And you can see here in this screenshot, I also just need to own, I was such a hater of the theme being love, because my immediate thought at the time was I need to viz about my love life, which was actively the last thing I would want to viz about, because I was going through a breakup at the time. I just love, just like Taylor Swift, breakups and heartbreak just fuel my art. And so when I saw the theme was love, I was definitely like, of all things, you had to pick love seriously. But after a beat and some research, I then landed on being like, oh no, I don't have to focus on my love life. I can focus on love in the context of Taylor Swift's song catalog. I found this really cool article that shared that as Taylor Swift gets older, she uses the term never less, and uses the words always more. And so then that made me curious of being like, okay, well, like, what about other words that she's definitely used in her beginning album? Like, she uses the word love in her beginning. How does that go? And some interesting, she uses like love less and less, which is pretty cool. But then I had to build out the data set. So there's different ways to build out the data set. For me, I tried to keep it very simple and just keep it all in a Google Sheet, because again, time was of the essence. I had to be very intentional about like what songs were being included as well. I ended up about 205 songs I ended up sticking with. And then I was just trying to figure out ways to quantify the expression of love. So you'll see here in this screenshot that there are like columns that I ultimately probably like excluded from the narrative. Again, it was just because I was just throwing ideas at the wall, trying to be like, what is the best way to quantify love in as an expression? I also started pulling in like the Spotify API metrics to tie it in. I did like a fun marathon one night, shotgun 205 songs, listening to confirm the frequency of the word love in each of her songs. There was like a really awesome fan-made lyric search engine that someone made that I was also like double checking my work. So it was a little manual, but as like a fan, it was also just like a very fun marathon listening event. So the next step is the viz inspiration. And for me, I always have like a handful of vizzes that I always have in my back pocket as kind of my design inspirations. These two in particular are kind of my go-to classic ones. Like if I'm a little stuck on a design, or just like I'm kind of losing the forest for the trees, these are the vizzes that I typically go to be like, okay, let's go back to the plot. Like, what are they doing that I really like? And it helps me kind of realign. And they're both Iron Viz winners, which is like pretty cool from when I'm entering, to have these two vizzes to just reference a lot. The first on the left is The Emotional Balance of Broadway by Lindsay Poulter. I love this viz. It's just so simple. She doesn't lose the plot in this very like intricate analysis. The chart choices are so elegant and sublime. The color palette is clear and easy to follow, like one of my all-time favorites. And then on the right is the iconic RuPaul's Drag Race Sinks by Lisa Trescott. And I love this because it's such a strong branding of joy. I think that was the theme for that year. And she also packs a lot of cool Tableau features like throughout her viz, that from the outside you don't quite notice until you're digging in and you're like, wow, this is like, she has pagination in here. She has radar charts. And I just think it's a delight to go through. And so these two are kind of like my design North Stars. I, of course, would take variations and do my own thing. But whenever I was kind of losing the plot, I would look at these two to remind myself where I am. And so I mentioned earlier that color was going to be a very important part for my viz. And you can see here, I had 10 albums I had to differentiate, which means I had to have 10 color palettes to go along. The great part is, because the Eras tour was going on at the same time, I actually had a sense of like how they were differentiating the different eras. You can see on the poster, they have a specific color assigned to each era. For those of you who may not know or have been living under a rock, the Eras tour is Taylor Swift's giant love letter to her decades-long career, spanning where she performs a song from nearly every one of her 10 different eras. And then she ends the tour, Future, she ends it with 11 eras because that's just what she does, and I just love it. So I first had to do a primary palette, which you can see I directly pull from the poster itself, from the art of the Eras Tour. But then you can see I also added a secondary color just in case I needed to do one or more colors when I was doing an era specific analysis. And you can see in the viz, that's exactly what I did. My goal with doing this was I didn't just want to let my readers know, oh, I'm talking about Speak Now, I'm talking about Reputation, I'm talking about folklore just by the label. I also wanted them to visually experience like, okay, like I see purple. Not only do I see it labeled, I also see that specific Speak Now purple. That's telling me I'm looking at a Speak Now specific insight. I added it not just to different charts and different sections. I also added it into the little side note, like, hey, like flag that's right next to an individual insight. For me, that meant it helped me keep my brain straight and all the different containers going on, organized. And I think it just had a really nice effect because when you're balancing that many different colors, you have to be very intentional on every use of the color. And also not just if you're using that color, you also have to like reinforce it in other ways. So my hope was between the colors and the labeling, they kind of got the balance so everyone can always be clear on what era, what album we were experiencing in the viz. However, I also needed to create a palette that would be used to highlight to the readers when I was not talking about an individual era, but also about the overall catalog as a whole. I actually pulled the inspiration from lyrics that Taylor herself has written about love. She, in later albums, starts describing love as a golden. She uses color quite a bit, and she uses love a lot to describe it as gold. And that's kind of where the idea of having this gold cover to kind of call out like, hey, we're talking about it as a whole, not just individually. And I really like it. I love that the overall viz palette for like an overall commentary came specifically from 2 songs, Daylight from her Lover album and Red from her Red album. And you can see here how that translates. So when you look at these sections of the viz, not only do you see in the labeling and in the context and of the content, but you also see visually, okay, we're only talking about the overall album. Like we're not talking about an overall album. We're talking about the overall catalog. For me, as a developer, it helped me keep it clean. As someone who was reading this and going through this, it just helped to keep it organized. Okay. So here's my little spiel about IronViz. Your biggest nemesis is not what you know, your data. I mean, that is a nemesis, but truth be told, your nemesis is time. Fraser and Chimdi mentioned that like some people, they gather their data set before the theme's announced, and they hope that their theme, that what they were working on is somehow relevant to their IronViz entry. I'm gonna tell you, that's not me. I wish that was me. That's not me. I am always just like, well, I hope this viz is relevant, and I hope I have an idea, and then I am like, okay, off we go to the races. So on the left is a general timeline guidance that came up from Britt Rosano that I really like. It kind of helps me have this guidepost for when I'm entering IronViz to be like, okay, week 1, let's do data exploration. Week 2, let's like try to make sense of the data that we've been exploring. 3 is storytelling and design. And 4 is just like all those little details. I wish it was as organized as event. I kind of tend to develop my IronViz a little more chaotically than that, but I try to use these like weeks as kind of tent poles to be like, okay, this is generally where I should try to be. And then on the right, I also have to talk about some of my personal time constraints, which is 1, I can't work on my IronViz during the workday. Some people, they get approval from their boss to work, and I'm sure my boss would have approved it. But truth be told, like, there's just a lot going on that sometimes I just couldn't I just didn't have the time. I just couldn't. And then another one is I personally make this commitment that if I made plans that just happened to be during the IronViz window and then IronViz gets announced, I'm not backing out of those plans. For me, that's like, no, you made a commitment. Let's stick to it. Like, don't let entering IronViz take up your whole life for a month. Let's have balance. And then the final two notes was I actually volunteer as a panelist for the IronViz Community Feedback Initiative that's run by Sarah Bartlett. I'll mention it later on in the slide, but it's a really great opportunity if you're entering IronViz to get feedback from different members of the community. And that usually happens around like week 3 and week 4. And then finally, this was 2023, October 2023. So go back in time. That was when Taylor was dropping her 1989 Taylor's version, which means 5 new songs were going to be introduced to my data set at around like the last week or 2 of the development period. So I also had to be conscious of just that. Actually, like 3 days. That was, wow, past Emily, you were crazy for doing that. So glad you did it, but crazy. So then how did I manage it within like the context of the 4-week period, but also the constraints that I had as on my personal availability? I had four strategies. One was that I was sketching and ideating away from Tableau desktop a lot during the day, visualizing it. Like I think I've used Tableau for so long that I can just like close my eyes and see the Tableau desktop. It's very Queen's Gambit style. And then I just kind of like move things around in my brain. Pen and paper, I would also just like doodle and work on some ideas out. I would exclusively reserve the bulk of my actually sitting down in front of Tableau desktop. I would only do that at night and during very specific time blocks. So by ideating and sketching away from Tableau Public, by the time I was my scheduled block of working in front of my computer, I already had ideas of what I wanted to throw into the canvas, because by that point I had already kind of figured out some storytelling moments. It's a really great way to make the most if you don't have a lot of development time, is to mentally like figure out the flow and everything away from it, because you don't need to be in front of Tableau desktop to do that. I had a more positive perspective and I reframed the previously held plans away from that I was determined to hold on to. I reframed it less as like conflicts and actually more as like, no, I'm going to schedule these as like very much needed breaks. So, you know, the pottery class that I go to every Monday night, instead of being like, oh my God, I'm losing development time because of that. Like now I'm just like, no, you're taking a break. And then you come back from pottery class, you'll come back refreshed because it's right after work. Come back and then work an hour or 2 after pottery class on your viz and then go to sleep. And then finally, especially in those last 2 weeks, that's when I was just like, you know what? I just don't have time. And these are just nice to haves. And I would just deprioritize and descope and cut features. And I think that's like, remember that you're the creator of your viz. You're the one who's in charge. So if you decide, you know what, this feature is not needed, all power to you. It's your viz. Go ahead and like cut it. So then with that in mind, because remember, this is my biz and I love it. The main stakeholder is really me. I'm going to walk you all through also how I developed it. So as a reader, you're seeing section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 individual sections and you're seeing them as a linear beginning, middle, and end. I need you to know as a developer, that wasn't exactly how the viz came to be. It was more like 5, 2, 4, 3, 1, 6. I essentially worked my way from the middle and slowly worked my way out. And I really like this approach because I had to actually analyze individually each era before I could actually come away with an overall perspective. Sometimes you can work your way outside going in, but for this specific one, I really did. The narrative strength of my analysis really hinged on how well I knew the individual eras, and then I could compile it all together as a 10,000 foot away, being like, okay, and this is what it means overall. And that's why you can see that section 5 and section 2, the by errors, and were kind of the ones that started out slowly but surely. And you can see that the ending was really the final stretch for me. But all of that had such humble beginnings. You can see on my version 1, I started October 7th, 2023. I've had really humble beginnings. It started out with a scatter plot, bar charts, and a line chart. You can see version 1, 2, 3 is when I kind of start getting the idea of the colors. I start playing with the donut charts a little more. 4, you can see that the middle section's looking a little more of what our final section was. Section 5, I'm noodling around with the beginning. I'm kind of like, I don't love it. Let's see if we can put something flashy up there. I'm also starting to be like, okay, like let's have a commentary on love as a whole. I start getting over my fear of Sankeys. I start playing around with some map layers. 5C, the error section is really starting to come together. And then I'm sort of like, oh, I kind of have an idea of the ending. I kind of don't. And I really like showing this to people because when you see the finished product, you're like, how did she even begin? Like when I see other people, I'm like, how did you even start? And it's really great to see how, you know, it's all about the building blocks of your iteration. If you don't have it now, that doesn't mean 24 hours from now, something's going to click in your brain and then you'll have a whole new section. It's all about just like throwing things at the wall and then being like, okay, this didn't work out, but maybe in the next iteration, this idea will come back. And you see that throughout the iterations of my viz. Okay, so now I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get some ideas. I'm starting to do the chord diagram chart at the opening viz, kind of starting to write a little bit more, starting to work on the writing. I'd like to always shout out to this lovely plum pudding chart that was perfect when my song data set was 200 and then completely collapsed when it was no longer 200 and it was 205 songs because it was beautiful and I just couldn't make it work. And that's so sad, but it's okay. It'll live on to another iteration somewhere. I start, you know, it's starting to look a little more of like what people know this as. The Sankey chart is, I'm starting to work it together. I finally figured out where and how to introduce the Spotify balance scores. And then I start doing the nitty gritty part of figuring out alignment, which, you know, alignment's very tedious to figure out, especially if it's all like, you only have 10,000 pixels to use, and I love to use every single one of those pixels as I possibly could. So this is the part where I'm like, okay, you got to do it now because you don't want to be up until 11:59 p.m. working on this the day of the deadline. And unfortunately, I had plans that day, so I really couldn't be up that late. This is also where I started to just cut. Like I said, sometimes ideas, they're wonderful ideas and they were great for the moment and then they just had to get cut. One of the ideas was that I was going to put Easter egg messages about why some of the songs really matter to me, kind of like how Taylor Swift did in her first 6 albums. And then just like Taylor Swift, I learned that this is not the time to take one last shot at your ex-boyfriend. So current me is so glad past me was like, let's not do that. Really glad. So, you know, there are some decisions you make in the moment that future you will be grateful for. And I am very grateful for that. Another thing that I ultimately had to cut, I was waffling on the ending quite a bit. As you'll see, the scatter plot was literally figured out the day of the deadline. At one point, I thought I would be kind of like how Lisa Trescott ends her viz by being like, create your own playlist. I thought of that, but then I couldn't kind of figure it out. And I was like, oh, that's not really it. There's no ending to the analysis and your analysis and storytelling score is going to suffer. Also, like what, you know, I opened this viz by being like, how does she express love? And you would think then I have to end the viz being like, well, this is how she expresses love. And I kind of got it. I don't know. Time is trying to change my opinion on it, but you know, all works in progress. So then I ultimately cut the playlist. Look at the date. It's October 28th. The deadline was October 31. So I have 48 hours to get this together. I cut the playlist, and I really do commit to working on the ending section. So this is the first time you see a scatter plot, getting my wish of having a scatter plot in this viz. I announced on October 30th to my group chat that I cracked the ending, and I am just editing and editing away. By this point, I'm pulling all-nighters because, you know, I just love this. I just love Iron Viz, and that's not with a hint of irony. I truly do. And I was like, I'm determined to finish this viz. And then I'm still editing. By this point, I'm kind of like, okay, just throw it in. Throw your writing into it. Let's see what happens. So the tooltips are starting to get formed. I made dynamic tooltips. And then I did like a scarf of like where I think the next album, the 11th album would be, which I was terribly wrong. She was not optimistic in love. Hopefully that's TS12. TS11, she's really in her feelings. I haven't seen what this data looks like with the new album, so I'm very curious and excited to do that, and hopefully that's done. It'll get done eventually. I also last minute was like, what are my favorite Taylor Swift tracks? Just kind of, again, just doing the last panic, throw it in. Once it's done, it's done. And so I really want to show like this was how it started and this is how it ended. I started this viz being like, do not lose the plot, Emily. Do not lose the plot. You are not going to lose the plot. You're going to be able to stay focused, have clear, concise storytelling. And then I ended it just being like, oh, thank God I'm done. Like, I got to go to dinner. Let's go. I'm late. I'm like 3 hours late. My friends knew I was going to be 3 hours late. See you later. And you know, sometimes that's so real. Truth be told, sometimes that's how the story goes. And that's my biz in a nutshell. And just thank you so much, Taylor Swift, for your art. But I want you all to know that like in that kind of speed ran recap of the development of this viz, I wasn't developing it completely in like a little void in a dungeon by myself. I mentioned earlier that there's an Iron Viz feedback initiative that's every year hosted by Sarah Bartlett. I also participate as a panelist, but I also participated as someone who was looking for feedback. So shout out to Candice Chi, Michelle Freeman, and Sarah Bartlett for being my Iron Viz feedback initiative panel. I think I signed up for like 2-3 sessions, like trying to make the most of it. Incredible help and perspective from these wonderful panelists. But then I also have, you know, if Iron Viz is like running a marathon, everyone has a marathon support group. And for me, these were these 3 wonderful women, Elisa Davis, Nicole Klassen, and Jessica Moon. We're in a little group chat, and when it's Iron Viz season, we text each other and go, okay, who's entering, who's not? And then we check in on each other throughout the month, being like, how are you doing? Do you need a gut check? Sometimes I'll be like, hey, is this rendering correctly? Just to kind of check. We'll service soundboards, we'll debug gut checks, or like some weird bug, something being like, well, hey, this is rendering weird on my screen. I don't know if you're aware of it. And most of the time, it's mostly us being like, I can't believe the deadline is almost here. Oh my God. And I also like to point out, like, I'm very lucky to be in this group. Jessica Moon ended up being on the final stage that year. So I feel like that was a win for our little running group. Nicole Klassen was also in the top 10. Elisa Davis is an incredible visitor. She's made her entry for 2025, jumping into the future. Our Hot to Go biz is wonderful and just so joyful. And shout out to next month's, because Elisa Davis and Nicole Klassen are the 2 speakers. So shout out to my friend. Shout out to our friends. But yes, this Iron Viz accountability group chat was very helpful for me to be like, oh my God, what are we doing? This was also where I had the idea for the viz itself, was just like chatting about the theme. So if you're thinking about entering and you have a friend that you don't mind sending DMs to and being like, you want to do this? Like, I recommend it. It's fun to run this with a running group. Okay, so long story short, what did I learn? Okay, there's about 6 things I learned and kind of like a bonus. So first is picking a topic you're confident in. Not only does it make it kind of fun, it made it fun for me, but it also made me feel very confident in my analysis and the narrative choices that I've made. I had to make a lot of choices in the creation of my viz that like someone else maybe wouldn't have made the same choices. But at the end of the day, it's my biz. And I'm trying to make my best, put my best foot forward. And it was fun to pick a topic that I was like, well, even if someone disagreed with me, I could argue why I made that viz. And I think that's a really important part of the storytelling and analysis piece, especially when you're building your narrative, which leads to my next point. Keep your data story simple. I love to lose the plot. I love details, and I sometimes means to lose the plot, which goes into my third one. By keeping your data story simple, how does Taylor Swift express love in her lyrics? It's a very good North Star to be like, okay, Emily, you don't need to add the create playlist. Emily, you don't need to add these Easter eggs shouting out your exes. You don't need that. And it was very helpful to be like, I don't need that. I don't need that. Let's move on. Great idea. Maybe for another time. Off we go. And I'm very glad. I think that's a really great part as an analyst. Like for us, we love to throw everything in the kitchen sink because it's all in the hopes of helping our end user, our data partners have all the information they possibly need. That sometimes it's hard to scale back and be like, they don't need that. It's okay. That's for you. At my core, I think I'm way less of a minimalist. I'm such a maximalist. So the important lesson of just being like, just cut it is something I'm still learning on and on and on. I just love throwing in every possible detail. And sometimes you don't need that detail. It's a nice to have. Next up is that Iron Viz can be a nourishing creative reset. It sounds like it's intense. I just have an intense process. Other people have way chiller process. I'm just not a very chill person by nature. But for me, I love entering Iron Viz because it kind of reminds me of like what it's like to be in the driver's seat and be the one in charge of like, the person that I'm trying to please the most is myself. I have very high standards, which I'm working on to be a little more cool about it. But at the end of the day, like this is an opportunity for an artistic expression, to learn. And that's a really great reset and a way to learn in this competition. Yeah, I love to win. I'm a little competitive. I love a game. But at the end of the day, it's about what I learned, and that's going to carry me on forward through my career. My other note is to please get your judges' feedback. Don't be shy. Email, fill out the form. I wish I had done that for my first 2 entries. I kind of was like, oh, I made it to the top 10. You don't get feedback? And then someone's like, what do you mean? Everyone gets feedback. And I was like, what do you mean I could have been getting feedback this whole time? So this viz was actually the first time I got feedback on my entry. And I say that to be like, it doesn't hurt. It's always good to know when entering an art competition like this, all you can do is put your best foot forward and then learn from there. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about making it to the final stage. It's so hard to make it to the final stage. It's about learning and putting a new cool piece onto your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, everyone's a winner. And I say that earnestly and truthfully and with all my heart because I didn't make it to the Iron Viz final, but I did win Vizzies. I use this Viz to talk about with other people in my life. I talk about it with my fellow Swifties who love it. I talk about it when I'm going through a design kind of deep dive, just as I am with you all today. I never thought I was going to win a Vizzy, especially because I was a very 1 Viz a year type of gal when it came to Tableau Public, much less make it to Visionary. And you just never know what a Viz you make, where it's going to go. For me, like this Viz taught me to be very confident in the narration that I choose to present and storytell on. It taught me to be brave and take a storytelling that I felt very proud of. And it's just something like you just never know what happens when you publish things out into the world. You can use a Viz for your next job. You can use that Viz for an application to grad school. You can use that Viz. You can make a new friend through a Viz. Like when I entered a few years ago, I made that lovely friend group of my Iron Viz running buddies. You just never know. So if there's anything, I know there was a lot of information I kind of just threw at everyone today, but if there's anything I hope you take away is I just hope you really try and see what happens next. And with that, do we have any questions? That's it.
Yes, we do have some questions. Before I read some of them to you, I would like that magnifique visit, magnifique delivery of this speech. I love it. I think that you should be on stage at TC.
I'm trying.
Next year.
Well, if it's
So
meant to
one
be, it'll
question
be.
that I have for you is, what will you do differently? Is there something that you, or it's too soon, or do you need more time before recently?
Oh, I love this question. I love this question because especially like it's been 2 years since I created this viz, almost 2 years, a year and a half, give some math. And something that I didn't touch on is when you build a viz like this, it's truly it's a time capsule of the developer that you were at the moment. Like I look at my 2020 Iron Viz and I'm just like, oh girl, I love what you did, but I wouldn't make the same choices now, knowing what I know now. Also, there were different features available back then. Like in 2020, like what, we just got Viz and tooltips like in 2018, 2019. Like the technology has changed. So when I look at this Viz, I think I would spend more time on the ending. I got really close with the ending of being like, hey, let's look at it overall with the scatter plot. But I still struggled with the ending. I would also change the beginning Viz. So I would probably retool the beginning and the ending just a little more. And it makes sense that those were kind of the weaker parts because in my development, you see, I had the least amount of time. So I think that's what I would do. If I ever get a chance to update this with her new album, my dream scenario is a one screen Viz. So not a long form. So that way I can just keep adding data sets and more of like a dashboard. But we'll see. I hope I make it. Yeah.
Did you manage to get a reaction? I know it's difficult, but did you try?
I don't want to meet her. I feel like such a
did you try? You could try to send it like through like a fan group or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, like I'm just happy it's out in the world and that like I have something that I can be like, I'm really proud that like, you never know, like just as like Lindsay Poulter and Lisa Truscott's pieces, like they inspired me. Like, I'm just glad that like I loved her art so much. And like the data set is so rich that I was able to create a viz of this nature in my portfolio. I joke a lot. I don't want to meet her because I don't want to look not cool in front of my musical hero.
Okay, I see that.
I like in a perfect world, I would react like, hi, it's so nice to meet you, professional. Gotta be honest, I don't trust my nervous system to that level. I think I would turn into like a screaming, sobbing, hyperventilating.
Oh my God.
And I don't want that in front of my musical hero. Like, I don't want to be known by her.
Yes.
Respectfully, don't want to be known by her. I'm known enough lyrically by her. Don't need to be known physically by her. Just a big fan.
We have another question about how you did you get the data from Spotify? Did you use an API or something like that? I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I have a way better process now, but the process I had back then was not as neat. Let's say. I first found the Spotify API. I think I was on Kaggle, and I was like, okay, this has the first 9 albums. Great, we're missing an album. And then I found like a crowdsourced Swiftie data set where they had it all also. But they didn't have all of the re-recordings, and I needed to refresh the data one more time for the new album that was dropping in October. So shout out to Jessica Moon and Nicole Klassen because they helped me directly interact with the API to get it when the new album dropped. I will also say there's another way of doing it. Like someone has like, just like you put everything in a playlist and then you can pull it from there. So I use like an app. I think I can follow it up. I haven't used it in a while, but there's like a UI something that you can just like go through and pull it. And that's my new process now. But when I was developing it, that was not the process. And I don't recommend the chaotic way I did it the first time around. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. It was a pleasure. I think that we should close that because we have like not beat the record, but we are not far away of beating the record of the longest tug ever. So thank you very much, everyone. We will send the information over by email. Don't forget to register for our next analytic tug, so I don't bother you with emails. We will have Nicole Klassen speaking about landing pages, Dan Shiksik about recursive parameter, and Elisa Davis about fancy full viz. So I cannot wait for the next episode. And see you soon, Emily, at TC.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.